Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Anthony with the VR Game Rankings YouTube show, and you guys are tuned in to the daily vlog series. It is Thursday. It is March 22nd, and this is episode 124 of the show. And today, guys, guess what? It is all Oculus all the time. Yeah, this is kind of like an Oculus GDC special. We got a lot of Oculus news that hit yesterday. I didn't cover it in yesterday's show because it was breaking right at the time of recording. So what I've done is I've allowed myself basically a 24-hour period to kind of digest all this information and then come up with the show that I have for you today. So we're going to get into a number of different Oculus topics, and maybe at the very end there could be some non-Oculus stuff, but I have to imagine that the Oculus related info will probably eat this entire show. So it's probably going to be all Oculus all the time. And one other thing I have to talk about in regards to this specific episode is you're probably going to see me looking over there at my notes quite a bit because there is a lot of information, a lot of little details, and I'm going to miss a lot of it if I just try to go 100% off the top of my head. So I will be looking over there quite a bit during this episode, trying to look at some of the key topics that I don't want to forget about. So if you notice that, that's why that is going on, and it's a special situation with just so much Oculus news that hit yesterday and also a little bit today as well. So why don't we go ahead and just get the party started? First story of the day is that the Oculus Go is going to feature a 72 hertz mode. Yeah, so we did not know about this. The Oculus Go, we thought, was basically a 60 hertz device, very similar to the Gear VR, and it was going to basically have the same type of situation going on as far as the Oculus Go. But one of the big news items that did break recently is that there will be this 72 hertz mode. Now, here's the thing. It's not that every single game and every single application is going to run at 72 hertz. That is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is that is almost like a turbo mode or a boost mode that can be kicked in if the developer of whatever the game or application is takes advantage of this. And if they can figure out that they can go ahead and put their game or app into this mode without having too much trouble, then it will benefit accordingly. Because what this 72 hertz mode provides is, when you think about PC VR gaming, it's 90 hertz. The Oculus Rift is 90 hertz. The HTC Vive is 90 hertz. That's kind of the standard. The thought process has always been that if you want to have a very good experience, 90 hertz is your cutoff point. And we know that the Gear VR, of course, is 60 hertz and regular Oculus Go stuff is 60 hertz. So why do they have this 72 hertz mode? What Oculus has found out in their research is that this is kind of a good trade-off right here at the 72 hertz. Now, if they went all the way up to 90, obviously you get tremendous benefits from that, but then the graphical level of the games and applications would have to go back into the Stone Ages, and so they don't want to do that. But they found out that a trade-off, 72 hertz, provides a really nice trade-off situation where if a developer takes their time and they dial in their experience for this 72 hertz mode, what it's going to result in is there's going to be less flickering, there's going to be a little bit less eye strain, and also the game or application could be a bit brighter and a bit more colorful. That seems to be a side effect of running in the 72 hertz mode. And I'm not 100% positive of this, but some of the stuff I read seemed to indicate that an experience could run at 60 hertz part of the way and then could run at 72 hertz part of the way. And basically what I mean here is that if an experience gets really hot and heavy, that it can dial back down, drop down to the 60 hertz, and then when it slows down a little bit, it can go back to 72 hertz, so that there might be a dynamic ability to bounce back and forth between these two separate modes. Now, that is not confirmed. I read that in a couple of different places, but we don't know that that is completely locked in. But basically, that is the deal when it comes to the 72 hertz mode that the Oculus Go is going to feature. Now, what other interesting stuff is Oculus Go going to feature? Well, we found out about, this is story number 2, by the way, we found out about a fixed foveated rendering mode. And so what Oculus is doing here, those of us that have played Batman Arkham VR, either on a PlayStation VR or possibly your Oculus Rift, HTC Vive, or maybe even Windows mixed reality headsets, one of the things that Rocksteady did with Batman Arkham VR is they used basically kind of a fixed foveated rendering system where in the middle of your viewpoint, the resolution is at full resolution, and then on the outside edges where you're typically not looking at too much, they went ahead and kind of used a much lower resolution out there. And what that allows them to do is it allows them to make the visuals that are in the middle have a little bit more pop, a little bit more higher detailed, and it gives the rendering engine more bandwidth to work with, basically. And so what Oculus has done is they've decided to come up with a system-wide version of this same type of concept, and that's what they're doing here with the fixed foveated rendering. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and have a slide on the screen right now. You should see a picture. This is what Oculus showed off to developers, where they said this is how they're going to take your typical view and they're sequencing it off. They're sectioning it off into these separate quadrants that will feature different levels of resolution. So in the main center area, that is full resolution. And then when you get towards the bottom sides and also the bottom right here, that will have half resolution. And so the red areas have half resolution. And then if you go to the green areas that you can see scattered around there, those are at 1/4 the resolution. And then you'll notice there's a number of blue areas. These blue areas are 1/8 the resolution. And if you look way up top, the very top corners, it's kind of a purplish color. That is 1/16 the resolution. So basically what they've learned in their labs, studying how people dart their eyes around and look at different things when they're enjoying various VR experiences, it's obvious that very, very rarely do we look up in that very upper corner. And so what they've done is, well, hey, we can render that area at 1/16 the normal resolution, and we can get away with it. And it provides extra bandwidth to make all the other experiences a little bit better. So that's what they're doing here with this fixed foveated rendering. Now, one of the things that we do need to understand about this, a lot of software that is going to be coming to the Oculus Go is going to be basically Gear VR ports. And a lot of these Gear VR ports should run just fine on this hardware and it should work great. But I don't believe that they're going to be able to take advantage of this. I think this is a technology, this is a feature that will probably be limited to Oculus Go specific software, although I'm kind of just making this up as I go along. I don't have actual confirmation of this. I'm just kind of assuming that's probably going to be the way that it's going to be. And, you know, going back to the 72 hertz thing, that is part of it as well. It's going to have to be software that is more specifically dialed in for the Oculus Go to take advantage of some of these special features. I don't think it's just going to work on everything that just comes to the Oculus Go. So we do need to remember that. Okay, let's go into story number 3. Story number 3 is basically, I wanted to talk about kind of the general impressions from people out there that are at GDC and have got their hands on time with the Oculus Go, and just kind of the general feel out there in regards to the Oculus Go. Now, the main general feel that we're getting throughout the internet from everyone's impressions is the fact that people are kind of blown away, not so much by the experience that they're getting with the Oculus Go itself, but the fact that you're able to get an Oculus Go for $199.99. Like, people are trying it out and they're like, wow, this thing is really $199.99. This is a steal of a deal. This is some good technology. It's a good package that they've put together. It does have its share of trade-offs, but remember, $199.99, that is a magical price point, at least here in the United States. I'm not sure about worldwide, but there's something psychological about that $199 barrier. And that's really one of the big things that comes out of a lot of these impressions is people are like, you know, I tried it and I still can't believe that people are going to get that kind of quality for $199. It is an outstanding value. So that was one of the biggest impressions that came out of a lot of people trying the Oculus Go. Now, on the downside, obviously, there are downsides, there are trade-offs, and the biggest downside, of course, has to do with the 3 degrees of freedom. Yeah, this is not a 6 degrees of freedom headset. A number of people talked about how they were doing they were basically playing a demo of Catan VR, like Settlers of Catan VR, which, by the way, is available right now on the Oculus Rift, and it will be coming to the Oculus Go right away at release of the Oculus Go, which we do expect will be May 1st at F8, which I kind of predicted a while back that Oculus might hold it back a little bit like that just for more press, more general press covering the Oculus Go, and to try to get a little bit more of a widespread press coverage from that standpoint. But people were trying Catan VR, and it's kind of a natural feeling to kind of want to lean into the experience at certain times, because you're basically playing a board game in VR, and it's natural to want to lean in and look at the table closer or something like that. And that's where the experience kind of breaks with the Oculus Go, because this is not 6 degrees of freedom. You cannot lean around. You can move your head, but you can't lean forward and lean back like that. And so some people were like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about the 3 degrees of freedom. That is obviously the biggest downer when it comes to the Oculus Go. One other thing I'll mention in terms of kind of slight downers, Addie Robertson of The Verge, she recently popped an article, I believe earlier today, where she kind of had her thoughts, her early thoughts on her sample of the Oculus Go, and she mentioned a couple of minor negative nitpicks about the Oculus Go, and I figured I might as well pass those along to be fair and balanced and cover all the good and the bad. And basically, one of the things she said is while the unit is comfortable, and a lot of people did say that it was very comfortable to use, she did mention that it is quite front heavy. And it's front heavy because the CPU, the GPU, the battery, all that stuff, the screens, all of it are in there, and nothing is being like balanced on the back end there. So this is kind of a front heavy headset. It has not got the kind of balance like an HTC Vive Pro has been specially balanced to kind of really balance it out there. So it is a little bit front heavy. So that is maybe a slight concern. And then the other thing that she mentioned is that this is a cosmetic thing, but she was talking about how there is a seam between the side and front panels that make the headset look a lot cheaper than it actually feels. So this is one thing that she noticed, although I haven't really heard other people talk about that too much. So maybe, different people will notice different things when they get their hands on a new product like this. Okay, now in terms of graphical quality, one of the things that I've heard a number of people mention, this is basically a Gear VR is pretty much what we're talking about here. But one of the things that people have said graphically is that the geometry, a lot of the games that they tried out, that the geometry is maybe similar to, say, PlayStation 2 level of geometry and polygons and that kind of thing. But then you're adding, say, the lighting effects of, say, Xbox 360 level lighting effects. So that's kind of the graphical ability that you're going to get from, say, an Oculus Go. I have to actually admit, you know what? Can you believe this? I've been in this VR game for I don't know how long. I have never tried a Gear VR. I don't have a Samsung phone, and I just have never tried a Gear VR. So I don't even have like a basis of what these graphics are going to look like. But from what I understand, kind of PS2/3 360-ish era graphics. Kind of a mixture between the two is what we seem to hear about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch over. We talked a lot about the Oculus Go. Again, we believe this is coming on May 1st. We believe that Zuckerberg is going to walk out on stage and say, Oculus Go $199 available now. And so that's probably going to happen on May 1st. But let's go ahead and switch over to the Santa Cruz. And the Santa Cruz, we have learned some interesting information in regards to Santa Cruz at this unveiling of information that Oculus dropped yesterday, yesterday was the day when they dropped all this information. So basically, one of the things that we've heard in regards to the Santa Cruz is it appears that this Santa Cruz headset is really trying to straddle the fence between an Oculus Go and an Oculus Rift. And so what I mean by this is, well, you got the Oculus Go, you know, it's 3 degrees of freedom. The controller is 3 degrees of freedom. And so you're limited there with what you can do. Then you have the Oculus Rift, where it's 6 degrees of freedom, and the controllers are 6 degrees of freedom, both of them, and you have legitimate hand presence. So you have that, but it's tethered. It requires the power of a PC to drive it. And so the Santa Cruz is kind of a marriage of the two. It tries to provide the benefits of an untethered situation and some of the advantages that the Oculus Rift has with 6 degrees of freedom. And so it appears that they're kind of trying to straddle the lines of these two things. And then another one of the things that we heard about, well, there's a number of little slides that they presented in their talk about this to developers, and they're talking about developing for the Santa Cruz. And one of the big mantras that they had in regards to the Santa Cruz is, it's about the experience, not the chipset. This is something they kind of tried to hammer home to developers. Don't worry too much about the fact that it's got a mobile chipset. Instead, concentrate on the experience. In fact, on the slide that they were showing, it says, think of Santa Cruz in terms of the experience it can provide, not the chipset it has. You still need to optimize for a mobile chipset, but developing Rift quality content is the goal. So that does seem to be kind of the mantra that they're going with in regards to Santa Cruz. Now, what kind of chipset is in there? Well, I don't think we got actual locked in information about this, but I believe it is a Qualcomm processor, and rumors suggest that it is a Snapdragon 845 processor. Now, obviously, we know Qualcomm has their own little reference design that their more developers are going to be looking at later this year. We might get the first reference designs of that Qualcomm standalone headset next year, and it appears that the Santa Cruz is also going to use this Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 processor, although that is not locked in stone. Now, another thing they talked about in regards to developing software for the Santa Cruz platform is that there is a low barrier to entry for development because Santa Cruz is an Android-powered device. Any computer that can develop for the Gear VR/Oculus Go can also be used to develop for Santa Cruz. So there is this low barrier of entry for people to develop for it. That is a good situation there. And then one of the most important design aspects of the Santa Cruz in general is the fact that they were very careful when designing this to really think about the heat dissipation. And this apparently is where the Santa Cruz has a major advantage over a lot of other mobile-based chipsets, is that basically this was designed where they don't need any of the other phone-related technology. All they need to do is focus in on gaming and experiences, and so all the other phone-related stuff is removed from the equation, and the focus is very much on heat dissipation. And because of this, supposedly this will allow the Santa Cruz platform to run at higher clock rates than any other known hardware in its class, than any currently existing hardware. Now, again, not really sure how it's going to relate to Qualcomm's newest design that is based on the Snapdragon 845, because they could be talking about currently existing mobile platforms which are using the Snapdragon 835. So Not really sure how that comparison is going to work between, say, a Santa Cruz and one of the reference Qualcomm designs that are going to be coming early next year. So basically, that's pretty much what we have on the Santa Cruz. That's most of the information that I have there on the Santa Cruz. And then now I wanted to get into basically just some general Oculus related news that maybe doesn't fit into any specific category like the Oculus Go or say the Santa Cruz. This is kind of some general Oculus information that also came out in this unfolding of all this information. So we found out that 94% of Oculus Rift users have touch, that basically another 5% are sim gamers, and then there's 1% that is completely clueless and doesn't even know that touch is available. Okay, I made up that last part, but basically, yeah. So Oculus just basically said 94% of Rift users have touch. There is this 6%, and a lot of people kind of assume that the 6% is people that are really into sims. They play racing games, flight simulator type games, and they don't need a controller. You know, they don't need an Oculus Touch controller because they have their steering wheels, they have their HOTAS, and all of that type of thing. So that kind of makes sense there. Jason Rubin was talking about Oculus Studios, and one of the things that he mentioned is that Oculus Studios is kind of going to be shifting their focus. That in the past, their thought process was funding a large number of small games and doing it kind of in that way. And what they're going to do is they're going to kind of flip the script. And instead, what they're going to do is they're going to support a much smaller number of overall games, but they're going to be supporting much bigger games, more AAA type experiences. And the thought process here, Jason Rubin is basically saying, look, we feel like he's basically saying they feel at this point in time, there's a lot of small games that are available, a lot of very good small games. In fact, I mean, you think about stuff like Kin and In Death and, you know, all the different games that have been hitting the Oculus Rift, not necessarily like major, huge monster games, but still very high quality games from smaller developers. We have a lot of those that we're overflowing with that. And so basically the focus is they're going to take their war chest and instead they're going to focus in on much bigger, much grander experiences, because that's probably where the funding really needs to go, because it's harder to make these situations materialize than all the bunch of small games. The small games are going to happen anyways. And so I kind of agree with this strategy. I agree with this thought process. So I don't really see a big problem there. Now, Jason Rubin, he also responded because there is a little bit of a worry that has been kind of bubbling under the scenes where some people are worried that Oculus in general is moving away from PC-based VR gaming towards more of the mobile VR gaming and the standalone VR gaming. I mean, that's what the Oculus Go and the Santa Cruz is all about. So some people could kind of look at all of this and be like, oh man, these guys are moving away from the Rift. They're moving away from PC VR gaming. This is not a good situation. Well, Jason Rubin wanted to respond to that. And so I actually have a quote here. Here is his quote about it. He says, I want to be really, really clear here. PC is vital to the VR business. We think PC will lead the industry for the next decade or more. There's so much more we're going to be able to do with VR, and PC is where we figure that out. So Oculus is investing just as much in PC as ever. We're in all three categories: PC, mobile, standalone, and we plan to stay there. And so basically what he's trying to do is he's trying to calm the fears that some of the biggest Oculus Rift supporters have, and where they think, you know, Oculus is moving away from PC. He's saying, look, settle down. We understand that PC is where our bread is buttered, at least for the next decade, because that's where they have to figure everything out. And the stuff that they figure out on PC, then that can then trickle down to their mobile efforts, their standalone efforts. So he's basically saying, chill out, everybody. There's nothing to worry about here. We are very much supporting the PC VR marketplace. Do not worry about that. One other thing that he mentioned is he said that, well, he basically said, this is kind of a boasting statement here. He says, Oculus is winning in every hardware category that it has entered. And, you know, I guess technically that's right, because when you look at the mobile thing, I mean, Oculus Gear VR powered by Oculus, right? So they're winning there if you consider the Gear VR is kind of their deal. And then now they got the Oculus Go. It's going to be $199. They're probably going to win there just with that kind of a price point and the mass market ability there. And they plan on winning in the standalone, you know, higher end market as well with the Santa Cruz. And they're obviously winning in the PC VR space with the Oculus Rift. The Oculus Rift puts things together probably better than any other platform. We do have the Windows mixed reality platform that is actually coming in at a lower price point when you consider all the aggressive discounts that we see at Amazon, and sometimes even at Costco. We'll see that one of the headsets is going for $200 every once in a while at Costco, but it sells out almost instantly. But there is a little bit of pressure there from the lower price. But yeah, I mean, I guess I can kind of agree with it. They are winning in every category that they're in technically at this point in time, but we'll have to see if they're able to maintain that over a longer period of time. And then a couple of just really minor things. I don't have a lot of information on this, but Oculus did announce that as part of Rift Core 2.0 that they've come up with something called positional time warp, and it is going to be a key component going forward. And basically what positional time warp brings to the table is it's smoother at a lower frame rate, but it does require depth information to work. So if developers are going to take advantage of this, they do need the depth information. Now, I got to admit, I don't really know too much about this, but Carl Sagan 79 on Reddit, who happens to be an Oculus employee, by the way, that is working on this exact stuff, he had a comment on this. I figure I would go ahead and read his comment because it might provide a little bit more clarity. So he's basically talking about positional time warp. He's basically saying it is positional reprojection, where asynchronous space warp relies on the color buffer to infer motion. Positional time warp uses the depth buffer and the known location of the person to infer motion. So basically, positional time warp is kind of their newest special sauce that developers will be able to use to kind of make their experiences a little bit better when it is a bit of a more demanding experience. If they have that depth information to be able to make this happen, then it could provide smoother frame rates, a smoother experience at an even lower frame rate. So that is positional time warp. Like I said, I don't really have a lot of information on that. So unfortunately, you're just going to have to deal with that as far as that's concerned. But if anybody's like a super expert on that, you can go ahead and leave a comment and maybe I can bring that up on tomorrow's episode. But anyway, guys, that's going to go ahead and do it for today's episode. Obviously, in other news, Arc Park is available today. Lots of people are complaining about there is no smooth locomotion. It is teleport only. So a lot of people are groaning and moaning about that. Some people are groaning and moaning about the $40 price tag. A lot of people on the PSVR subreddit are saying that Arc Park is kind of a dud. On the PSVR version, that kind of seems to be the general gist of a lot of people over there. Now, in the PC VR space, Oculus Rift and Vive owners, it's kind of a mixed bag. Some people are saying it's really blurry. Other people are saying they've been impressed. They're impressed with what they've seen. Some people are saying it's just a wave shooter, you know, what's going on here, but it is dinosaurs. So anyway, that is Arc Park. I might have my own firsthand impressions on that tomorrow. So that's something we could look forward to on tomorrow's episode. But that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. This has been episode 124 of our daily vlog series for Thursday, March 22nd. Everybody have a wonderful Thursday, and I will be back on Friday to wrap up this exciting GDC week. There's a lot of other game announcements and stuff I got to get into as well. Just didn't have the time for it today, but we'll get into that tomorrow. See everybody tomorrow. Take it easy. Later.